Imagine this. You wake up one morning, you check the news, and the headline says, China is now the world's biggest economy. How do you feel? Surprised? Worried? Maybe not surprised at all.
That headline has not happened yet, but many economists say it is coming. The question is not if, the question is when.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Real World Real Stories, the podcast where we explore important global news in calm, clear, educational English. I'm James.
And I'm Olivia. We are so happy you are here with us today.
This podcast is made especially for people who are learning English and who want to understand the world at the same time. So if you are watching or listening right now, you are in the right place.
Before we start, please take 1 second, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and write your country in the comments below. We love to see where our listeners are from. It really means a lot to us.
Today's topic is big, very big. We are talking about the two largest economies on the planet, the United States and China. And we are asking, can China's economy overtake the US? And in which industries is China already ahead?
This is a topic that affects everyone, and I mean everyone. The phones in your pocket, the electric cars on your streets, the price of food in your local market, all of this is connected to the relationship between these two economic giants.
And here's something important to say from the start. Today, we are not going to take sides. We are not pro-China. We are not pro-America. We are pro-understanding. Our goal is simple, to help you see the world more clearly.
Exactly. So let's take a deep breath, slow down, and look at this together. Here is what we are going to cover today. First, we'll look at the background. Where are these two economies right now? Then we'll explore the industries where China is already leading. After that, we'll ask the big question, can China actually overtake the US? And finally, we'll think about what this means for the future, and for ordinary people like you and me.
And don't forget, we have a vocabulary section at the end. We have picked 7 important words for B1 learners, words you can actually use in real life. So stay with us until the end.
Let's go.
So let's start with the basics. Where are we right now in 2026? The United States has the largest economy in the world. Its GDP, that means gross domestic product, or the total value of everything a country produces, is around $30 trillion. That is an almost unimaginable number.
And China? China's GDP is around $19.65 trillion. So China is number 2. But the gap between number 1 and number 2 is getting smaller every year.
Right. And here's something interesting. Think about this. In the year 2000, China's economy was less than 1/10 of the American economy. 1/10. Today, it is about 2/3. That is one of the fastest economic rises in human history.
And the speed of growth is still different. The IMF, that's the International Monetary Fund, a major international organization that studies world economies, projects that China will grow by 4.5% in 2026. The US, about 2.4%.
So China is growing almost twice as fast as the United States, but the US still has a much bigger base. It's like 2 runners. One is faster, but the other started much earlier and is still far ahead.
I like that analogy, but here is the question I always ask. How long can China keep running at that speed?
That is exactly the right question, Olivia, and we are going to come back to it. But first, let's understand how China got here, because this didn't happen by accident.
No, it really didn't. The story begins in 1978. Before that, China had a closed economy. The government controlled almost everything. People were very poor. Then a leader named Deng Xiaoping made a historic decision. He said, China will open its doors to the world. China will allow foreign companies to invest. China will build factories and export goods.
And it worked. Over the next 40 years, China became what many people call the factory of the world. If you look at a label on your clothes, your electronics, your toys, there is a very good chance it says Made in China.
But here is the thing. China is not happy with just being a factory anymore. China wants to be an innovator, a technology leader, a country that doesn't just make other people's products, but invents its own.
And that ambition means a strong desire to achieve something. That ambition is at the center of the competition between China and the United States today.
Think about that for a moment. What does it mean for the world when two giants, each with their own technology, their own trade rules, their own currency, compete for the top position? The answer affects all of us.
Okay, so let's get specific, because sometimes people hear China versus US and they think it's just politics. But actually, there are real industries, real sectors, where China has already moved ahead. and the numbers are quite surprising.
Let's start with electric vehicles, EVs. You have probably heard about Tesla, the American company. But did you know that China now controls more than 70% of global electric vehicle production?
70%? That is not a small number. That is most of the world's EVs made in China.
In 2024, China sold more than 11 million electric vehicles domestically. That means inside China alone. And the share of EVs in new car sales grew from just 6.3% in 2020 to an incredible 48% in 2024. Nearly half of all new cars sold in China are now electric.
Compare that to the United States, where the EV market share is still around 8%. So China is not just ahead, China is in a completely different league when it comes to electric cars.
And here's what I find interesting. The big Chinese EV brand, BYD, it literally stands for Build Your Dreams. And right now, BYD sells more electric cars than Tesla. The Chinese company is #1 in the world.
That is a great example of what we were talking about. China moved from making other people's products to building its own global brands.
But let me ask the uncomfortable question here. Is this fair competition? Because the Chinese government gives a lot of money to Chinese car companies, what economists call subsidies. That means the government helps pay the costs, so the companies can sell their products cheaper.
That is a real debate, and the US and Europe have responded with tariffs, extra taxes on imported Chinese cars, because they say it is not fair competition.
Right. So even in a sector where China is clearly winning, there are complicated questions. We'll talk more about that later.
Now let's move to energy, and specifically solar energy. This is one area where the numbers are truly stunning.
Jason Bordoff, he's a professor at Columbia University, said this: China has built more electricity generating capacity in the last 4 years than the entire US power grid contains.
Wait, say that again?
In 4 years, China built more new power generation than the total power generation of the United States. That is the entire American energy system built again from scratch in China in just 4 years.
That is, I don't even know what to say. That is extraordinary.
And solar specifically. By 2025, China's monthly solar power generation exceeded 125 terawatt hours. To put that in context, that is more than the entire US nuclear sector produces every month.
So China has already built a solar energy system larger than America's nuclear system. That is a profound shift in global energy, and it happened very quietly. Most people don't realize it.
And here's why this matters beyond just electricity. Energy is the engine of everything. The more cheap energy you have, the more you can manufacture, the faster your economy grows.
And this connects directly to the next sector we need to talk about: artificial intelligence.
AI. The technology that everyone is talking about. And here, the competition between China and the US is perhaps the most intense of all.
Right now, many experts say the US still has an advantage in AI, especially in the most advanced AI models. American companies like Google, Microsoft, and Anthropic are at the frontier of AI research.
But China is catching up fast, and China has one specific advantage that isn't talked about enough: energy costs.
Explain that for our listeners.
So training AI systems require enormous amounts of electricity. We're talking about huge data centers running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And electricity in China for these data centers cost around 3 cents per kilowatt hour. In the United States, about 9 cents, 3 times more expensive.
So Chinese AI companies can train their models at a fraction of the cost. That is a structural cost advantage that is very hard to compete with.
And earlier this year, in January 2026, a Chinese company called DeepSeek released an AI model that shocked the world. It performed at the level of the best American models, but it was built at a much lower cost. The stock markets reacted immediately. NVIDIA, the American chip company, lost hundreds of billions of dollars in market value in a single day.
So China is not just catching up in AI. In some specific areas, China is already competing at the very top level.
Competing, yes, but I want to be honest with our listeners. The US still leads in the most advanced semiconductor chips. That's the brain of every computer and AI system. And this is why the US has placed restrictions on selling the most advanced chips to China.
It's a technology war inside an economic war.
Exactly. And the battlefield is your smartphone, your laptop, your electric car.
Okay, wait, let's slow down. I want to ask you something directly. Electric vehicles, solar energy, AI costs. When you look at all of this together, what do you think? Is China actually winning?
In those specific sectors, yes.
So why do so many people still say America is dominant?
Because GDP is still bigger, dollar for dollar.
But GDP is a number from the past. It measures what has already been built.
Right.
So China is winning the future, even if America still leads the present?
That might be the most honest way to say it.
That changes how I think about this whole topic.
It should. The race is already happening. Most people just haven't noticed.
So now we come to the central question, the one that economists, politicians, and business leaders debate every day. Can China's economy actually overtake the United States in total size?
The short answer is maybe, but it is much more complicated than a simple yes or no.
Let's look at the optimistic case first, the scenario where China does overtake the US. What would need to happen?
Analysts at Citi Research say that in the base case scenario, that means the most likely scenario under normal conditions, China could surpass the US in nominal GDP in the mid-2030s, so roughly 10 years from now.
And Goldman Sachs has raised its forecast for China's growth to 4.8% in 2026 and 4.7% in 2027. That is higher than what most economists were expecting.
So if China continues to grow at roughly 4.5 to 5% per year, and the US continues to grow at roughly 2.5%, the gap closes relatively quickly.
Think about it this way. Imagine two people saving money. One person earns more, but saves at 2% per year. The other person earns less, but saves at 5%. After enough years, the second person catches up and then passes the first.
That is a good analogy. But, and this is a very important but, China has some serious structural problems that could slow down that growth significantly.
Let's talk about those. What are the biggest challenges for China's economy?
The first one is demographics. China's population is actually shrinking and getting older. This is partly a result of the one-child policy that China had for decades. Fewer young workers means slower economic growth. This is a long-term problem that will not go away quickly.
The second challenge is the real estate crisis. For many years, the Chinese economy was partly driven by property development, building apartments and selling them. But that bubble has burst. Major property companies like Evergrande have collapsed, and millions of Chinese families have lost significant savings tied to property investments.
And the third structural problem is consumer spending. In a healthy economy, ordinary people spend money on food, entertainment, travel, technology. This drives growth. But in China, people save too much and spend too little. The government wants to change this, but it is not easy.
So on one hand, you have incredible strength in manufacturing, technology, and energy. On the other hand, you have real demographic, financial, and consumer problems. Which side wins?
Honestly, it depends on which China you're looking at. If you look at the factories and technology, you see a rising giant. If you look at the villages and the families, you often see a more complicated picture.
And I think that is an important lesson. Countries are not one simple thing. China is not just a factory. It is also 1.4 billion people with different experiences, different problems, and different hopes.
Ask yourself this. If you are a young person in China today, what does this economic story mean for your life? Do you feel the success, or do you feel the pressure and the uncertainty?
Let's zoom out and think about geography, because where China is located and where it is building its influence matters enormously.
China is physically located at the center of Asia. It shares borders with 14 countries, more than almost any other nation on Earth. It has access to major ocean trade routes, and through a massive project called the Belt and Road Initiative, China has been building infrastructure, roads, railways, ports, bridges, in countries across Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America.
The Belt and Road Initiative. Let's explain this for our listeners. It started in 2013. The idea is simple. China invests money in building infrastructure in developing countries. In return, China gets access to new markets, new resources, and new political relationships.
Critics say China is creating debt traps, lending money to poor countries that cannot pay it back, and then gaining control over their infrastructure. China says it is helping developing nations grow.
The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. What is clear is that China has built extraordinary influence across the global south, that means the developing world, through this strategy.
And this connects to trade. China's trade surplus, the amount by which China's exports exceed its imports, reached a record $1.2 trillion in 2025. And in January-February 2026 alone, it hit $213.6 billion. Those are historic numbers.
So China is selling more to the world than it is buying, and it is using that wealth to build influence in strategic places around the globe.
And now China's 5-year economic plan, approved in March 2026, focuses on advanced technology, green energy, and reducing dependence on American semiconductors and software. China is explicitly planning for a world where it does not need the United States.
That is a significant strategic choice, and it has consequences for everyone. Now, let's look at the main actors in this story, because it is not just China and the US. There are other important players.
Let's start with the United States. The US has responded to China's rise in several ways. First, tariffs, extra taxes on Chinese goods. The Trump administration has been aggressive on this front. In March 2026, the US launched new trade investigations into 60 economies over labor practices. That shows the level of trade tension in the world right now.
But here's what is interesting. Despite the tariffs, China has continued to grow its exports. How? By redirecting trade. Instead of selling directly to America, China has increased exports to Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America. And some Chinese goods enter the US through those countries.
So the tariffs have not stopped China's economic engine. They have just changed the routes.
The European Union is another important player. Europe has its own complicated relationship with China. It is both a major trading partner and a competitor. Europe has introduced tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, but European businesses still depend heavily on Chinese manufacturing.
And then there is the rest of the world, the global south. Many developing countries are not choosing sides. They are pragmatic. That means practical, focused on what works for them. They take Chinese investment, they take American aid, and they try to benefit from both.
India is also worth mentioning. India is now growing faster than China in some projections. It has a young and growing population, the opposite of China's demographic challenge. Some economists say that by the 2040s, India could become the third superpower in this global economic race.
So when we talk about China versus US, we should remember, the world is not binary. It is not a two-team game. It is a complex, multipolar world, and the rules are changing fast. James, can I ask you something directly?
Of course.
You've been talking about China's rise as something almost inevitable. Do you actually believe that?
I think the evidence points that way, yes.
But you're not worried about the political system, about the lack of democratic accountability.
I think those are important values. But historically, economies have grown under many different political systems.
But the people who pay the price when those systems fail, they're not the economists writing the forecasts.
That's fair.
They're ordinary workers in Shenzhen factories, families in villages that haven't seen the growth, young graduates who can't find jobs.
You're right. I sometimes get caught up in the big numbers and forget the human stories behind them.
The numbers are real, but so are the people.
Let's talk about what this competition means for ordinary people around the world. Not just for governments and economists, but for people like our listeners.
The most direct connection is trade. When you buy a product, a phone, a piece of clothing, a kitchen appliance, the price you pay is affected by the economic relationship between China and the US.
For many years, cheap Chinese manufacturing kept prices low around the world. That helped consumers, but it also hurt workers in other countries who couldn't compete with Chinese factory wages.
And now, as China and the US raise tariffs on each other's goods, those prices are starting to rise. A recent analysis suggests that American tariffs on Chinese goods could cost the average American household several $100s per year in higher prices.
So the trade war has real costs for real families.
Supply chains are also affected. Think about a supply chain as a long chain of steps: raw materials, manufacturing, shipping, retail, that brings a product to your hands. Many global supply chains run through China. When those chains are disrupted by tariffs, by political tensions, by pandemics, the effects spread quickly.
We saw this very clearly during COVID-19. When Chinese factories stopped, the world ran out of things. Computer chips, medical equipment, basic goods. The whole world felt it.
And companies learned an important lesson from that experience. They started to diversify, to spread their supply chains across more countries. Vietnam, India, Mexico, these countries have all benefited from companies moving some production out of China.
But China has not lost its position. Its manufacturing advantages, scale, infrastructure, skilled workers, are very difficult to replace quickly.
Think of it like this. Imagine a huge river that has been flowing in one direction for 40 years. You can build new channels, and some water will flow elsewhere, but the main river keeps flowing.
I like that metaphor. China's economic momentum is like a river. You can redirect some of it, but you cannot stop it overnight.
And this momentum has created winners and losers around the world. Countries that have integrated with China's economy, South Korea, Australia, many African nations, have benefited. Countries that have competed directly with Chinese manufacturing, like some parts of Europe and America, have faced real economic pain.
So what could happen next? Let's look at 3 possible scenarios for the next 10 to 15 years.
Scenario 1. Managed competition. In this scenario, China and the US continue to compete, economically and technologically, but they manage the tensions carefully. Both sides recognize that they need each other.
Trade continues, but both countries also invest in their own industries. The world remains stable, but divided into two economic zones, a Chinese zone and an American zone.
This is probably the most likely scenario according to most analysts. Not friendship, not war, but careful, calculated competition.
Scenario 2. China overtakes. In this scenario, China successfully solves its structural problems, the demographics, the property crisis, the consumer spending issue. Technology continues to advance. The economy grows at 4-5.
Let's spend a moment on the challenges, because both sides, China and the US, have real problems. This is not a story of one perfect country versus one declining country. It is more complicated.
China's challenges, we've mentioned them, but let's be clear. Demographics. By 2050, China's working-age population will have shrunk by hundreds of millions. Property. The collapse of major developers has wiped out savings and reduced construction, which was a huge driver of growth. Consumer confidence. Chinese people save a lot and spend relatively little, which limits domestic growth.
And there is also the question of political risk. China's economy is managed by the government much more than a typical market economy. When decisions are made by political leaders rather than free markets, it can lead to very efficient outcomes, but also to very costly mistakes.
America's challenges are different, but also real. Debt. The U.S. national debt is now over $35 trillion. Political division. The U.S. political system has become very polarized. That means deeply divided, making it hard to pass long-term economic policies. Infrastructure. Many American roads, bridges, and power grids are old and need investment.
And there is also the challenge of inequality. The benefits of American economic growth have not been shared equally. Many communities, especially in rural areas and industrial towns, have not benefited from the tech boom. And those communities often have very different views on globalization and trade with China.
This is important. Economic statistics can look very good at the national level. GDP is growing, unemployment is low, stock markets are high. But for a factory worker in Ohio who lost their job because their factory moved to China, those statistics feel abstract. Their personal experience is very different.
And that gap between the statistics and the lived experience, that is at the heart of a lot of political tension in America today.
Honestly, it's at the heart of political tension in many countries. When people feel that globalization has taken more from them than it has given, they vote for leaders who promise to put walls up.
And those walls, tariffs, trade restrictions, they do protect some jobs, but they also raise prices for everyone. There are no easy answers here. So what does all of this mean in the long run? Let's think 10, 20 years ahead.
The most important long-term consequence might be the creation of what some economists call a bifurcated world. That means a world split into two systems, one centered on American technology, the dollar, and American-style business rules, the other centered on Chinese technology, the yuan, and Chinese-style economic governance.
Imagine two different internets, two different payment systems, two different sets of technology standards. Some analysts say we are already moving in that direction.
This matters for every country in the world. When you buy a 5G network from Huawei, the Chinese tech company, or from Ericsson, the European company, you are making a strategic choice about which technological world you belong to.
And for developing countries, this creates a real dilemma. Chinese technology is often cheaper. American technology is often more advanced and comes with political relationships. Which do you choose?
The second long-term consequence is climate and energy. China's dominance in solar panels and electric vehicles means that the world's green energy transition will largely be shaped by Chinese technology and Chinese industrial decisions.
That is actually quite a hopeful aspect of this story. China's investment in renewable energy is genuinely good for the planet. Even if the geopolitical competition is worrying, the clean energy revolution is moving forward partly because of China's economic power.
I agree, and that is the complexity of this topic. China can be a strategic rival to the US and a necessary partner in fighting climate change at the same time.
The world is not simple, and the more we understand that complexity, the better equipped we are to navigate it.
Let's take a moment for listeners. Think about your own country. Where does it fit in this story? Is it part of the Chinese economic orbit, the American one, or somewhere in between? Because most countries have to make difficult choices in a world of competing giants.
And now, one of our favorite parts of every episode, the vocabulary section. Today, we have 7 words and phrases for B1 learners. These are words that came up naturally in our conversation today.
And these are words you will hear again and again in news, business, and everyday conversations.
Ready? Let's go through them. Word 1. GDP. Gross Domestic Product.
We used this word many times today. GDP is the total value of everything a country produces in 1 year. It is the main way we measure the size of an economy.
Example. China's GDP is around $19 trillion. You can use this word when you talk about economics, news, or comparing countries. Word 2. Trade surplus. A trade surplus happens when a country exports more than it imports, when you sell more than you buy.
Example. China has a record trade surplus of $1.2 trillion. The opposite is a trade deficit, when you import more than you export. Word 3. Tariff. A tariff is an extra tax that a government puts on imported goods. Governments use tariffs to protect their own industries or to punish other countries.
Example. The U.S. put high tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. You will hear this word every time there is a trade dispute between countries. Word 4. Subsidy. A subsidy is money that a government gives to a business or industry to help it compete. Subsidies make products cheaper to produce and sell.
Example. The Chinese government gives subsidies to EV manufacturers. This word is important in discussions about fair trade and economic competition. Word 6. Structural problem. A structural problem is a deep, long-term problem built into a system. It is not a temporary crisis. It is a problem with the structure itself.
Example. China has a structural problem with its aging population. When you hear structural, think this is not easy to fix quickly. Word 7. Supply chain. A supply chain is the series of steps, from raw materials to the final product in your hands, that produces a good. It involves many companies in many countries.
Example, the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted global supply chains. Every product you buy is the result of a supply chain, often a very long and complicated one. Word 7. Demographics. Demographics refers to the statistical characteristics of a population: age, gender, birth rate, death rate. Demographics shape the long-term future of any economy.
Example. China's demographics are changing because of the one-child policy. When economists worry about demographics, they are usually worried about an aging or shrinking population. Great words today. Let me quickly repeat them. GDP, trade surplus, tariff, subsidy, structural problem, supply chain, demographics. These 7 words will help you understand economic news in English much more easily. Try to use them in a sentence today. Write one example in the comments. It is great practice.
Okay, we are coming to the end of today's episode. Let's bring together the main things we have learned.
Lesson 1. China's economy is large, fast-growing, and technologically ambitious. It has made extraordinary progress in a very short time. But it also has serious structural challenges, especially demographics and property. Lesson 2. In several specific industries, electric vehicles, solar energy, and some aspects of AI, China is already ahead of the United States. Not catching up, actually leading. Lesson 3. Whether China can overtake the total size of the U.S. economy depends on many uncertain factors. Most analysts say it is possible in the 2030s, but it is not certain. History shows us that economic leaders can also stumble.
And lesson 4, and this is the most important one for our listeners. This story affects everyone, not just politicians and economists, but workers, consumers, students, families. The relationship between these two economic giants shapes the prices you pay, the technology you use, and the job opportunities you have.
Understanding this story doesn't make it less complex, but it makes you better equipped to think about it and to make sense of the news you read every day.
And that is exactly why we make this podcast. Because when you listen to real English about real topics, you are not just learning language, you are building a mental map of the world.
Slow, patient listening to content like this is one of the most powerful ways to improve your English. Your vocabulary grows, your listening improves, your understanding of the world deepens. All at the same time. There is a beautiful thing about knowledge. The more you learn, the more curious you become. And curiosity, that is what keeps the mind young, open, and ready for anything. We are living in a time of extraordinary change. The economic map of the world is being redrawn, and you, our listeners, are watching it happen. In real time, in English. That is something to be proud of. One final thought from me. When you read about China and the US in the news, try to stay calm. Try to ask questions rather than choose sides. Try to understand why things are happening, not just what is happening. The world needs more people who think carefully and slowly, not more people who react quickly and loudly. And we believe our listeners are exactly those kind of people. Now, our call to action for today. If you enjoyed this episode, please like this video. It really helps the channel reach more learners around the world. And subscribe so you never miss an episode. We publish new episodes regularly, and each one is designed to help you understand the world and improve your English. And most importantly, please write in the comments. Tell us your country. Tell us your thoughts on today's topic. Do you think China will overtake the US? What do you think about the industries we discussed? We read every comment and we love hearing your perspectives. If this episode was useful to you, please share it with a friend who is also learning English. Help us build a community of thoughtful, curious learners all around the world. Thank you so much for spending this time with us today. We know your time is valuable, and we never take it for granted. Until next time, stay curious, stay calm, and keep learning. The world is complicated, but it is also beautiful, and understanding it, even a little better, is always worth it. See you next time on Real World, Real Stories.